Giuliani files for bankruptcy a day after a judge ruled for him to immediately pay $148 million to two Georgia poll workers who successfully sued him for defamation. In his filing, Giuliani listed nearly $153 million in existing or potential debts, including almost $1 million in tax liabilities, money he owes his lawyers, and many millions of dollars in potential legal judgments and lawsuits against him. He estimated his assets to be between $1 million and $10 million. Freeman and Shaye Moss, all right, sisters, wanted the judge to keep him from repeating the lies he spread about them following the 2020 election. The new lawsuit centers around Giuliani's comments during and after the trial last week, repeating the baseless conspiracy theories about Ms. Freeman and her daughter, Shaye Moss. The lawsuit states that Giuliani makes it, quote, clear that he intends to persist in his campaign of targeted defamation and harassment. It must stop. Well, Rudy, since we got two New Yorkers on the panel tonight, I'm going to flip something that Senator Sanders said yesterday. He said he's an immigrant. He left the Deep South to come to New York. So we're going to go with the New Yorker who's back in the Deep South. John Quayle, can this man hide from this debt he owes these sisters? Or what are we looking at here with this bankruptcy filing?
Well, unfortunately, with the bankruptcy filing, if deemed to be a legitimate bankruptcy filing in terms of the actual amounts of money that Ms. Freeman and her daughter are able to recover is going to be up to that bankruptcy judge. And essentially, they're going to go through all of his debtors, and then the court is the one that's going to make the final say. And so, unfortunately, yes, it does have a substantial impact on their ability to recover. But it's interesting because in the judge's sentencing order, the judge said that that the court was vehemently against him constantly trying to weasel out of paying these young ladies. So it will be interesting to see how all of this is going to play out. But the bankruptcy filing is unfortunate, but it's another tactic, as the court had a concern about that, of him trying to weasel out of paying these young ladies.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a quick follow-up question. The way I understand it, he could ask for a stay on Hal's ruling, but in order to do that, he might have to post a bond in the full amount of the damages. I mean, that's not possible, is it? He's not going to ask for a stay. I mean, would he have to post a bond in some amount if he asked for a stay? He's claiming he's broke.
That I'm unclear about. I'm unsure about to answer that question.
I just wonder, because you're absolutely right. By that order, that judge rained hot fire on Rudy Giuliani. He's been non-compliant. He's been, okay, that's very interesting. Lauren, you've watched and reported on Rudy Giuliani for a long time. What do you make of this latest development in the long, rapid decline of America's mayor, so to speak?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing to watch. I can remember when he first, I remember when he was mayor. I remember faintly as a kid when Ed Koch was mayor in a New York that is quite different than the New York we know now. He was credited with so much improvement in New York, particularly the Times Square area of Manhattan. And then, of course, Rudy Giuliani was mayor during 9/11. And I don't know what has happened to him. It's difficult to explain. I think some of it is that he really kind of got to a point where he unveiled his true feelings on race, which he had kind of hidden during the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, and now he really doesn't care. So there was that. And I think partly because Donald Trump just brings out the worst in everybody around him. To Rick Wilson saying that everything that Trump touches dies. But there were a lot of folks today that were saying that the bankruptcy, that he can't discharge this debt, this $148 million. He's not going to be able to wave that goodbye by filing for bankruptcy. Certainly, if it was that easy, everybody who has gotten a civil judgment against them would do that. They would file for bankruptcy 5 seconds after this type of a judgment. But he deserves every bit of it. He lied about Freeman and Shaye Moss and lied and lied and lied and lied. And I guess he thought that it didn't matter. And of course it did, not only in a court of law, but in reality. I mean, the truth matters and what you say matters. He caused them real damage and he lost. I also find it interesting that we live in a world where he is saying that he's bankrupt, but he's listing his assets of somewhere between $1 million and some other number over $1 million. Usually when people say they're bankrupt, they say they have no money at all, right? So
Right.
I guess this is New York, this is bankrupt by New York standards, so he has $1 million. I don't know. I think in the end he's going to get leaned. He's going to have to pay up, and I'm sure he owes a lot of attorneys a bunch of money. But it is a sad thing to watch. The man is 79 years old, and it is incredible the sweep of his life from where he was when he was a prosecutor in New York and then the mayor of New York, and now this. He's aligned himself with Donald Trump and really made himself into sort of a clown, quite frankly, a figure of ridicule and a figure of really laughter. So it's going to be interesting to see what's decided, though, and whether or not Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss see some money, which I think that they will, actually. We'll see.
Absolutely, absolutely. It reminds me of that old song by Harold Melville and the Blue Notes featuring Teddy Pendergrass. Rudolph Giuliani seems to certainly be singing now, "Where are all my friends?" I'm like, well, I'm not your friends, man. But anyway, Terren, you've seen this up close. Anybody who has, like all of us, watched that testimony from Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss, you're ready to fight somebody, man, when you see how these sisters' lives have been disrupted by this, and not just by Rudolph Giuliani, but all these minions calling the house, messing with Ms. Freeman's grandbaby, all kind of stuff going on. Any thoughts about this recent development and what this says about these attacks, particularly on black people? Because these two sisters certainly didn't deserve this. Nobody does, but particularly as it relates to how our people read something like what has happened.
Well, I'm glad you framed it that way, because these are the things that, if you take the humor out of it, you got to look at the real credible threats that happen when somebody like Rudy Giuliani or somebody like a Trump or somebody on the far right with a platform and a megaphone that big makes an accusation against somebody that's black, because you know that there is this sort of like deputization, this informal deputization that happens where people who believe the same way they do feel like they need to take the law into their own hands and set things right in their mind. So, I think part of the judgment was part of the fact of acknowledging the fact that these women were really under serious imminent potential threat. You know what I mean? All it takes is one maniac with a rifle to show up to somebody's house after somebody's information has been put out there to do something horrible and leave a household destroyed and leave somebody's life taken. And that's something that has to be considered as well. It's one thing to say that this is ridiculous, because these people are ridiculous in a way, but we can't discount the real clear and present danger people like this it can impose on, especially people of color, especially black people, because we know that anytime a black person's life is threatened, there's always somebody willing to take up that call and try to act on that threat. So I'm glad it happened. It's just sad, as Lawrence said, watching his career arc go the way it did, because he first came to prominence as a New York DA that took down the mob, and then he became prominent as being the mayor in New York, when 9/11 happened. I think some of that was just happenstance of just some of that was just left to chance. But to see somebody have a career arc go from somebody who was so credible to becoming almost a clown, to becoming somebody who almost looks like one of the people he prosecuted in the 80s is something to witness. It's a fascinating career arc. It's like the worst Wall Street sequel I've ever seen.
Well, I'm sure we all agree that there won't be many tears shed in black communities. Certainly there won't be any tears in Brooklyn for those who remember Patrick Dorismond, who remember Albert Luema. There certainly won't be any tears shed for those who remember Crown Heights and him out there leading the police in chants that it's Giuliani time, trying to take down David Dinkins. And there certainly won't be any tears shed in black communities, certainly all around New York, as the fact that he was never America's mayor as far as they were concerned. So, but you're absolutely right, brother, and thank you for bringing that out, because, money can't repair your safety when you got a bunch of nuts still running out here. So we've got to always keep that in mind.